The frosty air nipped at my cheeks as I looked up at the majestic mountains, their peaks shrouded in a thin veil of mist. I took a deep breath, the crispness of the air filling my lungs. My old friend Kevin stood beside me, his eyes shining with excitement. "Ready for the adventure of a lifetime?" he asked, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, a slight quiver in my tone betraying the anxiety I felt. Our journey began in the small town of Ouray, Colorado, where we'd rented a cabin for our winter camping excursion. Armed with tents, sleeping bags, and provisions, we set out to conquer the San Juan Mountains, our spirits high despite the dropping temperatures. The first few days were nothing short of magical. The snow blanketed the landscape in a pristine white, the silence broken only by the crunch of our boots and the occasional chirping of a brave winter bird. The world seemed endless, and we were explorers venturing into the unknown. But on the fourth day, the atmosphere changed. It started with subtle signs. A twig snapped in the distance, a flash of movement in our peripheral vision, a sudden chill running down our spines. We couldn't quite pinpoint what was wrong, but the feeling of being watched clung to us like a second skin. We tried to shake it off, chalking it up to paranoia and the isolation of the wilderness. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of purple and orange, the dread only intensified. That night, as we huddled around the campfire, a guttural sound echoed through the trees. It was an unearthly, bone-chilling noise that made my hair stand on end. Kevin and I exchanged a glance, our eyes wide with fear. "What the hell was that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know, man," he replied, his grip on the fire poker tightening. "But I think we should keep our wits about us tonight." As darkness enveloped us, we retreated to our tents, unease gnawing at our insides. Sleep was a distant dream, the eerie silence punctuated only by the occasional distant howl or rustle of leaves. Our minds raced, conjuring images of the creature that might be lurking just beyond the dim circle of firelight. The next morning, we awoke to find our campsite in disarray. Our provisions had been rummaged through, our gear scattered, and most disturbing of all, large, clawed tracks encircled our tents, as if something had been stalking us throughout the night. "It can't be a bear," Kevin muttered, examining the prints. "They should be hibernating." "Then what is it?" I asked, fear prickling at the back of my neck. Kevin shook his head, his expression grim. "I don't know, but we need to be careful." We continued our trek, our senses heightened and our hearts pounding with every snap of a twig or gust of wind. The feeling of being watched persisted, and we could no longer deny that something was out there, something that we couldn't explain. On our final night in the mountains, the air hung heavy with tension. The once enchanting snowscape had become a prison, trapping us with a malevolent presence that toyed with us from the shadows. As the fire crackled and popped, a sudden earth-shattering roar echoed through the trees, followed by a series of heavy, thudding footsteps. My blood ran cold, my breath hitching in my throat. "Get in the tent!" Kevin hissed, his eyes darting around the darkness. "Now!" We scrambled into our tents, hearts hammering in our chests. The footsteps grew louder, closer, the ground trembling beneath us. Whatever was out there, it was massive, and it was coming our way. As the footsteps drew nearer, I clutched my hunting knife, sweat beading on my brow. I knew it was a feeble defense against the unknown creature that stalked us, but it was all I had. Kevin gripped a flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness in a futile attempt to catch a glimpse of our tormentor. The creature circled our campsite, its breathing ragged and guttural. It seemed to be toying with us, daring us to face it. But we remained hidden, praying that it would lose interest and move on. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the footsteps faded, retreating into the night. The creature had vanished as mysteriously as it had arrived, leaving us breathless and trembling in our tents. We spent the remainder of the night wide awake, our ears straining for any sign of the creature's return. But the rest of the night passed in silence, the sun eventually cresting the horizon and banishing the darkness. As we packed up our campsite and made our way back to civilization, we couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, watching us from the shadows. The mountains, once a source of wonder and excitement, now held a sinister air, a hidden danger that lurked just beyond our understanding. The experience haunted us long after we returned home. We never spoke of it to anyone, our memories of the unexplained creature locked away in a mental vault, too terrifying to revisit. But deep down, we knew that whatever we had encountered in those mountains was something beyond our comprehension, something that defied all logic and reason. and as the years went by, I couldn't help but wonder if we had been mere playthings to that unknown entity, a fleeting source of amusement in its cruel game. The memory of those clawed tracks and guttural roars would forever send a shiver down my spine, a stark reminder that there are things in this world that cannot be explained. But one thing was certain: neither Kevin nor I would ever set foot in those mountains again. The hidden terrors they held were best left undisturbed, locked away in the icy grasp of the San Juan Mountains, never to be seen by human eyes. The vast frozen expanse of Lake Champlain stretched before me, its icy surface glinting beneath the pale winter sun. It was a sight to behold, a world of white and blue that seemed to stretch on for eternity. I'd always cherished these solo camping trips, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life and find solace in the heart of nature. My destination was a small, secluded bay on the Vermont side of the lake, a prime spot for ice fishing that I had discovered years ago. The trek through the snow-laden woods was arduous, but the promise of solitude and a bountiful catch spurred me on. Upon reaching the bay, I set up camp, the smoke from my modest fire rising like a beacon against the stark landscape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, I drilled a hole in the ice and cast my line, my breath forming ghostly clouds in the frigid air. The first few days passed in a blissful blur of fishing, tending to the fire and marveling at the beauty of the winter wilderness. I reveled in the solitude, the silence broken only by the wind's mournful whispers and the occasional cry of a distant bird. But on the third day, as I huddled in my parka and surveyed the icy expanse, I caught a glimpse of something I couldn't quite explain. It was a dark, indistinct shape on the far side of the bay, partially obscured by the tree line. At first I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination, but as I continued to stare, the shape seemed to move, shifting in the twilight shadows. I squinted, trying to discern its features, but it remained elusive, a mysterious entity that danced at the edge of my perception. Despite my curiosity, I hesitated to investigate, an inexplicable sense of unease warning me to keep my distance. Over the next few days, the enigmatic figure haunted my thoughts, appearing in the distance each evening as the sun dipped below the horizon. It never approached my camp, and I never mustered the courage to venture closer, but its presence weighed on me like a heavy unspoken secret. The nights grew colder, the winds howled more insistent, as if nature itself was urging me to leave the bay and return to the safety of civilization. Yet I remained, the mystery of the shadowy figure tethering me to the frozen lake. On my final night at the bay, as the wind shrieked through the trees and the ice groaned beneath the strain, the figure appeared once more. It was closer this time, close enough that I could discern its humanoid shape, though its features remained shrouded in darkness. It stood at the edge of the tree line, motionless and silent, watching me with an intensity I could feel in my bones. I stared back, my heart pounding in my chest, my body poised for flight. But the figure never moved, never made a sound. And as the darkness enveloped the world, it faded from view, disappearing like a phantom into the night. The following morning, I packed my belongings and left the bay, the sense of unease still clinging to me like frost on a window pane. I never discovered the true nature of the figure that haunted my days and nights on the frozen lake, but its memory would linger, a chilling reminder of the unknown lurking just beyond our understanding. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the image of the shadowy figure remains etched in my mind, a specter from a time when I dared to venture too close to the edge of the unknown. And though I have returned to the wilderness many times since then, I have never again ventured to that isolated bay on Lake Champlain, the memory of those haunting days and nights a constant companion. Instead, I now seek solace in the familiar comfort of well-trodden trails and the company of others. The mystery of the enigmatic figure, a story I tell around campfires, a testament to the chilling allure of the unknown. For in the vast, untamed wilds of the world, there are some things that defy explanation, secrets that belong to the realm of shadows, where the line between reality and imagination blurs, and the echoes of our deepest fears whisper on the wind. The steady crunch of snow beneath our boots echoed through the frost-laden forest as my friend Peter and I embarked on our annual winter camping trip. Our destination was a remote area in the Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York, a breathtaking haven of pristine wilderness, where the outside world felt a million miles away. We arrived at our campsite in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the snowy landscape. As we pitched our tents and built a fire, a sense of camaraderie and excitement filled the air, our breath visible in the frigid atmosphere. With the fire crackling and casting its warm glow, we decided to break out a bottle of whiskey we'd brought along, a small luxury to enjoy amidst the biting cold. The night slipped away as we drank and laughed, sharing stories and memories of past adventures. Eventually, the fire died down, and the whiskey lulled us into a deep slumber, the snow falling gently outside our tents. We awoke the next morning to a world transformed, a fresh blanket of snow covering the ground like a glittering white canvas. As we emerged from our tents, we were immediately struck by an odd sight, a series of boot prints encircling our campsite, weaving between our tents and snaking around the remains of our fire. Peter and I exchanged puzzled glances, our minds foggy from the previous night's indulgence. Neither of us had any recollection of leaving our tents during the night, and as we examined the prints more closely, we realized that they didn't match either of our boots. "Maybe one of us went for a walk and just doesn't remember," Peter suggested, his brow furrowed in confusion. I shook my head, unconvinced. "I don't think so. These prints don't look like either of our boots. And we were both pretty out of it last night, but I don't think we were that out of it." We tried to shrug off the mystery, chalking it up to another camper passing through or perhaps an overactive imagination, but the disquiet lingered, a persistent hum in the back of our minds as we went about our day, exploring the frozen beauty of the Adirondacks. As night fell once more, we huddled around the fire, our thoughts drifting back to the strange boot prints. We laughed it off, joking about ghosts and lost hikers, but the unease remained, a subtle undercurrent that tinged the night with an air of mystery. The following morning, we awoke to find the boot prints again, this time even more numerous than before. They crisscrossed the campsite, weaving in and out of our tents and around the fire pit, the snow heavy with their imprint. "What the hell is going on?" Peter muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. We spent the remainder of the day trying to unravel the enigma, following the boot prints through the woods, but they seemed to lead nowhere, disappearing as abruptly as they had appeared. The further we ventured, the more disoriented we became, our surroundings blurring into a maze of snow and shadows. As our final night in the wilderness approached, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, the boot prints a constant reminder of an unseen presence that hovered at the edge of our perception. We decided to forego the whiskey that evening, our senses on high alert as we huddled close to the fire, the darkness pressing in around us. Morning came, and with it the boot prints once more. We packed up our camp hastily, eager to leave the enigmatic tracks behind and return to the familiar world of civilization. We never discovered the source of the prints, nor did we ever encounter another camper during our time in the Adirondacks. The memory of those eerie boot prints in the snow lingered long after we'd left the mountains, a haunting reminder of the unknown that dwells in the heart of the wilderness. And though we continued to venture into nature, we never again visited that particular corner of the Adirondacks, the mystery of the boot prints forever etched in our minds. The first snowflakes of the season had fallen when my friends and I decided to embark on our winter camping adventure. My lifelong buddies, Tom and Phil, had always shared my love for the great outdoors, and the frigid chill of winter did nothing to dampen our enthusiasm. We packed our gear and headed out to the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, eager to test our bushcraft skills against the elements. The three of us had been camping together since we were teenagers, back in the days of Boy Scouts and campfires. We'd grown adept at navigating the wilderness, but winter camping presented a new challenge. The cold, the snow, and the shortened daylight hours would test our mettle in ways we had never experienced before. We chose a spot near Mount Rainier, Washington, a place we had frequented in our younger days. As we trekked through the snow-covered terrain, the familiar landscape seemed to morph into an entirely new world, cloaked in white and glistening with frost. We marveled at the transformation, reveling in the beauty and serenity of the winter wonderland. Our first day was spent setting up camp and gathering firewood. The biting cold nipped at our extremities, but we persevered, our spirits buoyed by the camaraderie and the thrill of the adventure. We pitched our tents, built a roaring fire, and settled in for the night, the comforting crackle of the flames lulling us into a sense of security. The following day, we explored our surroundings, searching for tracks of the elusive winter wildlife. Much to our surprise, we discovered a series of large, distinct footprints that could only belong to one creature, a bear. "What do you make of this?" Phil asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Shouldn't they be hibernating by now?" Tom, an avid outdoorsman and animal enthusiast, shook his head. "It's unusual, but not unheard of. It could be a late hibernator or a bear that's been disturbed from its den." "We should be cautious," I suggested. "The last thing we need is an encounter with a grumpy, half-asleep bear." We made a mental note of the tracks and continued our exploration, but the discovery weighed heavily on our minds. As dusk settled, we returned to our campsite, keenly aware of the potential danger lurking nearby. The night was cold and quiet, the only sound the occasional gust of wind rustling the branches overhead. We huddled around the fire, telling stories and reminiscing about our past adventures. The bear tracks were never far from our thoughts, but we tried to push them aside, focusing instead on the warmth of the fire and the company of our friends. But as the fire began to die down and the darkness pressed in, the unease that had been simmering beneath the surface bubbled to the forefront. We retired to our tents, armed with flashlights and bear spray, our senses on high alert. The hours crept by, the silence punctuated by the occasional snap of a twig or rustle of leaves. Each noise sent our hearts racing, our minds conjuring images of the bear lurking just beyond the circle of firelight. And then, in the dead of night, it happened. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees, sending shivers down our spines. We knew instinctively that it was the bear, and that it was dangerously close. "Stay in your tents," Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. "If we don't pose a threat, it might leave us alone." We huddled in our sleeping bags, our breaths shallow and ragged. The bear's heavy footsteps crunched through the snow, drawing nearer with each passing moment. We could hear its labored breathing as it sniffed around our campsite, exploring our belongings and searching for food. The minutes stretched into hours, our hearts pounding in our chests as we lay as still as possible. Every so often we would hear the bear growl or shuffle closer, and our adrenaline would spike, our muscles tensing in anticipation. At long last, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, the bear seemed to lose interest in our camp. Its footsteps receded into the distance, the tense atmosphere gradually dissipating as the danger passed. We emerged from our tents, shaken but unharmed. Our campsite was in disarray, but our belongings were mostly intact. As we surveyed the damage, we couldn't help but feel a newfound respect for the power and unpredictability of nature. "We got lucky," Phil murmured, his voice still tinged with fear. "We should pack up and get out of here before it comes back." We quickly gathered our things, leaving behind a few scraps of food as an offering to the bear. The journey back to civilization was silent and somber, our minds still reeling from the night's events. In the years that followed, our winter camping adventure would become a story we told around campfires, a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurked in the forest. The experience had left us humbled and wiser, a reminder that nature was not to be underestimated. And though we would continue to venture into the wilderness, we never again underestimated the power of the bear, the guardian of the forest that had spared us on that cold winter's night. The biting wind whipped through the trees as I zipped up my parka, the distant hum of a snowmobile carrying across the frozen landscape. My friends Dan and Sarah and I had decided to embark on a winter camping trip in northern Michigan. A weekend of ice fishing on Lake Superior, coupled with the chance to escape the urban sprawl, had been irresistible. Upon reaching our campsite, we hurriedly set up our tents and gathered firewood, the cold seeping through our layers of clothing. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and purple. We huddled around the crackling fire, the warmth a welcome reprieve from the icy air. The following morning, we made our way to the edge of the vast frozen lake, our fishing gear in tow. We spent the day drilling holes in the ice and patiently waiting for the telltale tug on our lines, rewarded with several plump trout for our efforts. As the sun began to set, we trudged back to our campsite, our spirits high and our stomachs eager for the feast that awaited us. We awoke the next day, eager to return to the lake and continue our fishing expedition. However, as we approached the spot where we had fished the previous day, we were met with an unnerving sight. The ice, which had been smooth and unblemished the day before, was now shattered as though something massive had emerged from the depths and broken through the surface. Dan, ever the skeptic, tried to rationalize the bizarre scene. Maybe it's just the natural movement of the ice, he said, his voice tinged with doubt. You know, expanding and contracting with the temperature changes? Sarah and I exchanged glances, our unease palpable. We had been camping and fishing together for years, and we had never seen anything quite like this. With trepidation, we ventured closer to the broken ice, examining the edges of the jagged hole. The shattered pieces lay scattered around the opening as if forcibly thrown aside by some unseen force. Our curiosity piqued. We spent the day exploring the surrounding area, searching for any clues that might explain the enigma before us. The unblemished snow offered no answers, no tracks or signs of wildlife to suggest a cause for the destruction. As the day wore on, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the frozen expanse, and we could not shake the feeling that we were being watched. That evening, we sat around the fire, our conversation turning to the mysterious event at the lake. We mulled over the possibilities, our imaginations running wild with speculation. Despite our attempts to rationalize the occurrence, a nagging sense of unease lingered, an unspoken fear that we were not alone in the wilderness. The next morning, we decided to cut our trip short, unable to shake the disquiet that had settled over us. We packed up our camp and made our way back to the snowmobiles, the broken ice at the edge of the lake a haunting reminder of the unknown. Years have passed since that trip, but the memory of the shattered ice remains etched in my mind. I still find myself drawn to the wilderness, the siren call of adventure impossible to resist. Yet I cannot help but feel a twinge of fear as I step onto a frozen lake, the image of the jagged hole forever a reminder of the inexplicable forces that might lurk beneath the surface. If these tales captivated your imagination, kindly grace the like, subscribe, and bell icons with a click. We replenish our story trove twice a day to keep you enthralled. Your presence has been truly appreciated. Thank you for lending us your ears, and we'll see you here again next time where the shadows whisper and nightmares beckons.